Hello, thank you. Welcome everyone for joining Religion Unplugged podcast, which is your regular plug-in for religion, news, and culture. I am Joseph Holmes, film critic, podcast host of this and the Overthinkers podcast. Please check that out. And I am super excited to have with me today Stacey Harkey. He is one of the original cast members of the great family-friendly a sketch comedy show, Studio C, which is available on YouTube. And also then, of course, they whole original cast moved on to do another awesome family-friendly sketch series and TV shows from JK Studios, where they did Freelancers and so many others. And now they have their first own full cast original movie, Go West, which came out in theaters in mid-July, and it's fantastic. So I am so glad to be able to interview Stacey Harkey, the stupendous and serendipitous Stacey Harkey. So thank you so much, Stacey, for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I've never been called serendipitous and stupendous, so hopefully I can live up to the hype.
You do in my heart, regardless. I have no doubt. So anyway, I have to ask you. So obviously, for people who don't know, as as I said in the intro, you got Stacey Harkey, you're part of the Studio C cast, who launched Studio C and then went on to do more stuff on a whole other channel, create their whole other channel, JK Studios. But this is the first feature film you guys have put together. I mean, I know a couple of the cast did their own movie that was sort of off doing its own thing, but this is the first JK Studios cast movie. So, first to start us off, why did you guys decide that the time was now to do your first feature film, and why did you decide on this film in particular?
Well, we have always we love creating, which is why we ended up leaving Studio C to start JK. Is we wanted
Dang.
to expand our creative reach and try our hands at new content and new material because the only way we're going to get better is if we try, right?
Right.
And so, after a time at JK Studios, we tossed around the idea of a movie. That's a movie that we did a show called Freelancers. I don't know if you're
Yeah.
familiar with it,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
JK, and yeah, and we were like, we should do a Freelancers movie. So the idea of a movie's always been tossed out, and Steven and I actually had an idea for a sketch comedy, a pioneer sketch comedy show, kind of to our little Utah roots,
Yep.
and just the idea of pioneers. And then Natalie, Mallory, and Whitney, as they often do, made it a better idea. And they were like, let's make it a movie. And it just kind of made sense. We've always had kind of a difficult time letting our audience know the best way to support us so we can make more content. And when
Hmm.
it comes to a movie, it's so simple. Everyone's familiar with it. We get the funding, we make a movie, you buy tickets and go see it.
Right.
And bam, it's so simple for everyone. It doesn't take a lot of explanation. And it was just like a new frontier for us. Like you
Hmm.
said, people have been working on movies. Mallory and Whitney did a movie called Stop and Go. It's a little bit more of a PG-13 movie.
Yep.
You have Jason, who's worked on a movie with, and Jeremy, who've done a movie called Villains, which is so funny. And also, that's going to be in a bunch of film festivals. You'll probably see that later. So it just made sense that we were like, let's put our skills and our
Well,
like what we've learned together and create a JK Studios movie, which is where this kind of came from.
very cool. Very cool. Now it's kind of the kind of movie that you don't see much anymore. It's most comedies today are essentially social satire. Movies where it's like, okay, we have like a point that we're trying to make about society, and we decide we're going to do it in a funny way. That's sort of where the trend is going right now. That's not a criticism or that's just sort of where it is
Just the
right now.
style.
Right,
Mhm.
exactly. But you guys are very specifically doing something. You've talked about it like it's kind of Monty Python meets the Old West. But I look at it and I'm like, oh, this is like Airplane or Top Secret
Yeah.
or those kind of where it's like the point is how do we cram as many belly laughs into the space of a few minutes as possible so people have a really
Mhm.
good time. And of course, I have to say, I did. Like again, I was it was the first 5 minutes of it, and I was like, am I loving this movie already? Like, is this so? So, like, what? what is, and of course that's always sort of been your guys' brand. Again, like
Yeah.
where you it's like, okay, we're just here to make people laugh and have a good time, stuff like that. And
Hmm.
so what was the reason for wanting to do a kind of a movie like this and be passionate about having this kind of be your kind of project?
Hmm. Well, you kind of nailed it. It's like our style has always been. I mean, we have a certain outlook and a model when it comes to comedy. And first off, we're just guessing. Where everyone's guessing. Comedy is so subjective. If there was a rubric, if there was a simple blueprint, everyone would be doing it, right? So we're just guessing, and hopefully we get better at guessing as we go.
Yep.
But one of our styles is that we like to have a high laugh frequency. We
Mhm.
want there to be a joke every like couple of seconds. We want there to be something that engages you, that pulls you back. And also, we we've talked about this as a company, and we met over the course of 2 days and put hours and hours and hours into what do we want to accomplish with our content. And yes, there's commentary, and yes, there is like activism work, and all these things are really important and different ways to explore comedy. But we've always wanted to do comedy that is inclusive. We want everyone to watch it and feel like they're a part of the team, to feel like the friendship that we have with each other. We want it to be belonging, just like invite you in for an hour and 20 minutes. You could just kind of like shut off your brain, forget about how stressful life is, how much everything sucks sometimes, and just like have a good time,
Yeah.
you know? And I feel like nowadays there's so much good work going on, but so much of it is like everything's the worst, everything's bad, everything's
Yep.
falling apart. And sometimes it's nice just to be like, but what about just like laughing, like the feeling of like being with your family, forgetting about time. People are laughing, and you're laughing, their laughter's making you laugh, and you're just like having a good, like we want that feeling. And so as we went into the brand of this movie, we were like, how can we use our sketch comedy, our scene writing background, and just have a good time? And so how we wrote it was we essentially had everyone met. It was so fun. And just the theme was Mallory and Natalie were like, the theme is Western Pioneer Frontier. Go. And people were just bringing fun scenes that had nothing to do with each other together. And what happened is we took our favorite scenes,
Mhm.
and then Mallory, Natalie, and Whitney went and they got like an Airbnb, and for a weekend they just like wove it together with a plot
Well,
and with some characters, and they moved some things around, and they did a really good job
yeah.
because it feels pretty cohesive in the flow and the story. But overall, it's like we have this cohesive story. We have all these bizarre, funny scenes, some more bizarre than others. And the idea is that, yeah, and the idea is that come in, join the family, have fun, and just forget about stress for an hour and 20 minutes.
One of the things I've liked, and again, I may be, you can tell me if I'm overthinking this or not, but I've always found your guys' particular brand of comedy to be very cathartic in a very specifically millennial kind of way, because it's always like, okay, we're gonna take a relatable premise, every something everybody has gone through. We're gonna blow it up to its most absurd proportions, and then we're going to allow somebody within the scene to admit how ridiculous it is. And I always found that sort of cathartic because there was almost a rebellion against the absurdity of the world we live in to say, yes, you're allowed to say how ridiculous this is. And that's
Hmm.
very, so I really appreciate that being a part of the story. Now I want to say again, like, this is Religion Unplugged. And, a lot of people, because again, you guys are very trying to be inclusive with your comedy. Not everybody who's a casual fan of yours knows that, the majority of the cast, at least, is Mormon and we met at Brigham Young University in Utah and started the whole project there. And so I wanted to know again, I don't know again, like I don't because you guys keep this fairly close to the vest, I don't know if you still consider yourself a Mormon, and if so, and I wanted to be interested in asking, like, how does your faith or your per- place in faith right now inform or not inform the work that you're doing?
Wow, we've always, and yeah, we met at BYU. We're all Mormon or LDS, and I think that in some ways, what that started with us was this kind of like joy of like having fun with with the communities we belong to,
Yeah.
right? It's like we're belonging to this community. It's okay to laugh,
Mhm.
and I think there's a range of what is considered secret or sacred, and what is considered like free game. And sometimes because we're different people, we have different lines on what that looks like, and
Yeah.
so we have a good mash. But I think whether it's being LDS or being Christian, We want our content to be enjoyed by all. And so when it comes to a more secular approach to it, when it comes to like ratings, we want you to be able to watch this with your grandparents
Mhm.
and they're going to have a good time and not be uncomfortable. We want you to be able to watch this with your kids and you're going to be like, they're going to be, have a good time and not be uncomfortable. And so I think, in a way, maybe those like the Christian roots like blend over. But at the end of the day, it's like, what is going to allow the most people to enjoy this?
Uh,
What's going to make this a movie where you can watch this with anyone in your family and not, have an approach? And maybe I do think there are a lot of elements that we feel come from our roots as far as like religion goes. Is like,
right.
and that first and foremost is like we're all siblings here. Like we're all
Hey.
on the same team.
Yeah.
And once again, you look at like, oh man. And obviously we're all different people. So we have different ranges of belief. And some of us are way more, consider ourselves way more actively religious than others. But at the end of the day, it's like we are all on the same team.
Okay.
And so how do we like really embody that with our content? And when it comes to family, it's like everyone has a seat at the table. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And if we do make fun of a certain group or something, we try to show the balance by like,
Yep.
it's like making fun of the situation, poking
Right.
fun to show that like, hey, we all have a seat at the table and we can laugh at each other and with each other. Kind
Yeah.
of thing.
No,
That
again,
makes sense?
one of the things that you guys did really well, I mean, like in, like in your early days, I mean, in Studio C, it's like, okay, you would do things that were about religious. So you like the shoulder angel sketch, where it's like, okay, you're not making fun of necessarily the values of, an angel or God or heaven or something like that. You're making fun of the kind of visual idea of somebody who's the same size trying to get on somebody's
Yes.
shoulder. And so
Right.
it's like, okay, what are these weird images that we have about religion, and how if you took them in like a larger direction, in a visual direction, how would that be funny? And that's again, that's very so, and that's right. Again, as a Christian, I definitely also relate to the whole idea of being religious in comedy is a bit hard, because it's like, okay, what things are sacred and off limits,
Mm-hmm.
and
Right.
and things like, no, that should not be made fun of. This should not be made fun of. For it's not. And you're right. There is sort of a line that's always drawn. Everybody kind of has a different sort of line, and again,
Uh-huh.
everybody has different line about what's family friendly. And so,
Mhm.
one of the things again is that, one of the first things that happened when you guys were, left Studio C and went to JK Studios is you did a sketch where you came out. And
Yeah.
and so, like, I would say, how was that kind of getting
Oh man.
inevitable pushback that you got, from that? Or was it
Mhm.
like, were you surprised at how accepting that it was?
Oh man, a little of both actually,
Mhm.
because Adam and I both have come out since leaving
Right.
Studio C, right? And one thing that was really cool was we talked about, and I think sometimes we get this like these weird, like sensational takes on what it means to be Christian
Sure.
sometimes. And what my group said, which I really appreciate, as I brought it to them, and I was like, this could be bad for business. And they were
Mhm.
like, listen, when we say this is a place of belonging, we don't mean it's just a place of belonging of people who act like us or
Oh.
look like us. Or like, if we're going to say there's a seat at the table for everyone,
Oh.
there is a seat at the table for everyone. And sometimes that means acknowledging that people are different. And you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
And obviously we respect people who are like, if they're like, hey, I don't feel like that's for me or my family, we're like, hey, you do your thing.
Sure.
We respect you and we empower you. But what we're not going to do is we're not going to exclude others because
Sure.
you feel like that's how we should, handle
Sure.
ourselves.
Yeah, yeah.
And so with me, I was very supported by my group, and it was very cool. And honestly, it was really cool to get. Man, I got thousands of messages from kids who were like, I don't know what to do. No one understands where I'm coming from. And to be
Mhm.
like, these people that I thought were really funny my whole life actually have created a little place for me to feel like belonging. And it
Absolutely.
was cool to see that. Yeah, it feels like at its core, like honestly, it's just like Christ like at its core. It's like, we don't care who you are. Love is here. You got a seat at the table, which is
Yeah.
cool. I was like, I feel really fortunate to work with a group of humans like that really don't just believe that, but like, put their money where their mouth is. Like
Right,
do it
right.
too.
Even when it might potentially cost them something. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. No,
So
that's
that's
true.
very touching.
Well, one of the things I want to touch on before we wrap up is that, most people, again, when they leave, like, they go off and
Mhm.
from their original, cast setting and their original place, they go off and kind of do things on their own. But what's amazing about you
We do.
guys is that you're like, okay, yes, we're the original cast, we're leaving Studio C, but the entire cast is going off to do something together somewhere else. And so, like, like that's I see that's rare. So it's like
It is.
what is it about? But again, of course, obviously, you guys are also still doing kind of your own things,
Yeah.
also, at least some of you are. And so what is it about you guys that made you just want to say, okay, we might leave to do other things, but we want to all take everybody with us?
We just, like, really like each other. We, like,
I
legit we, like, legit really like each other. There would be times in Studio C, even earlier before that in Divine Comedy in college, the
Oh
sketch comedy
wow,
group we
gosh,
started.
yeah.
Yeah, where we would
Early
so we've been
days.
working together, yeah, over 10 years, and we really still like each other, which I think is wild.
Wow.
But there'd be times where we would be together, like, the whole week, 12-hour shows, exhausted, and then at the end of the show, it's like, "So are we hanging out? Like, what's happening?" Like, and so being on set for, like, 10, 12-hour days and then hanging out, we were just, like, hanging out the other night, like, we
Yeah.
just really, really like each other, and we really respect each other.
Well,
And I think that's one of the bigger things as we came together. One of the audition processes to get into Divine Comedy that we established was not only just to like how funny you are, but it was like how do you show respect to others? And like part of it was like you're putting each other in these stressful situations, and we're seeing who's like able to maintain a level of respect, who's able to maintain an element of responsibility to what's best for the group. Um, and so I think that's actually been something that's carried around really far. Is like
yeah.
everyone in the group has a really big focus on what is the greater good? What is the greater good? And how do we show love and respect for each other as we navigate what that means? And there have been some really tough things we've gone through as a group, but like every time we go through it, we get closer and stronger as like a unit and as a family. And so I think and I'm so excited to see people doing their own thing and spreading their creative wings. And they know from me that I will always be a supporter of them. So if they call me and they're like, "Hey, we're making this big movie. It's huge. Will you bring food?" You don't have to be it. They know I'm gonna show up with chicken nuggets from
Yeah.
Chick-fil-A. You know what I mean? Like we support each other. And I feel that from my team. Like and no matter if they're involved or not, will have my back. And I feel so fortunate, and it's uncommon. And that's why we want people to like feel it. That's why we want to like
Wow.
share it, put it out there. It's good stuff.
Absolutely. So, you've already talked about sort of like what you want people to get from this. You want people to
Yeah.
get that is like, hey, everybody can come together with this and have a good time. And what is sort of next for you guys? Again, if you were like if okay, you've done it. You've made a JK Studios movie, and as a few of you are saying, okay, we're trying other things with making other movies. You've done a sitcom, with 2 seasons of
Mhm.
freelancers. What where does this go next? Do you want to say, okay, maybe we make another movie? Is there something else that you would like to do as again? Because if your whole thing is we want to spread our creative wings, but we want to do it together, what does that look like going forward? Of course, depending on, it's again, you only get to make another movie if you get the box office for it. But like, if you get to have your way, what does it look like going forward?
Oh, wow. So that's a good question. At our core, we love to create together.
Hello.
So we will create more. This is our first movie, and this is the toughest one because people are like, "Yeah, we've seen you make stuff. Yeah, we think you're funny, but can you make a movie?" And so
Well,
we luckily had some amazing investors who trusted in the process. We worked with its amazing producers at Brothers Inc., the Monteers. They're amazing. And they've been fighting just as hard as we have, which has really been cool. And and this is going well, and if it continues to go well, it'll be a little easier to get investors next time.
yeah.
And we will refine the process on our end. And so we're gonna make more. Whitney has an idea for a Regency era movie. Matt had an idea for a train heist kind of movie.
Oh,
Adam, a Christmas movie. Like it's like everyone, like we have all these fun, like a Halloween murder mystery. Like we have all these movie ideas, and we're so excited to create more. And there's all these show ideas we have too. And like it's just like this team is just brimming with creative like
well,
juju. And so, yeah, with funding, that's kind of the tricky thing.
Yep.
So people like it, and they go and just enjoy it. It's not even like support us. It's like, go enjoy yourself.
Right.
Have a good weekend. We will make more.
Awesome. So once it goes on its theatrical run, Go West,
Mhm.
where are you anticipating that people will be able to find it um, uh, on digital or streaming? Or is
Well,
that we
we
haven't
have
figured that out yet? If you haven't figured that out
I
yet,
know,
that's fine.
exactly. That's the thing is like, we're like, all of our focus is on theatrical.
Yeah.
All we're trying to do is we're trying to tread water amongst the giant waves of Barbie and Oppenheimer.
Yes. You decided to come out the same weekend as Barb and I. Yes.
We're in the theater doing a Q&A after the movie, and we hear the atomic bomb going off a couple theaters over. It's like hordes of pink feather boas are like walking by the
Yeah.
theater. So it's like it's so honestly, I will say it's like in some ways it's been amazing to be amongst, in the same space as giants like Greta Gerwig and
But
the Nolans. It's like we're like, what is even happening right now? This is crazy. And we actually do feel like Barbie and Oppenheimer are specific movies that cater to specific audiences, and Go West is a movie that's maybe a little bit more reach as far as like accessibility
yeah,
for
yeah, yeah, yeah.
families. So in some ways, we're like the bleed over has been nice, but in other ways, we're like, what do we think? But yeah, to answer your question, streaming and digital definitely is on the mind, but like hasn't been thought of
Sure.
yet. It's in there, but it's like right now, all of our focus is theatrical, and yeah, we'll see what
Like,
happens.
cool. All right. So if people, well, I guess everybody go see if there's a theater near you that is playing Go West. And if there is, definitely go support it.
Yes.
They can find if there's a theater near them at like gowest.com or jkstudios.com
Yes,
or
at jkstudios.com or gowestthemovie.com.
okay.
And we're constantly updating it with a list of theaters, especially as the national release is August 11th. We released in Utah. We're releasing in Idaho this
Gotcha.
weekend. Wow. So like national release, we're actually getting a lot of theaters lining up by demand. So if you want the movie to come to a theater near you, check out the website, tell us where you are. And we're getting like some weird places that we didn't expect. So like Kansas, Cincinnati, Chicago
Nice.
are, yeah, we're like, okay, college towns are like, hey, we want this movie. And we're like, all right.
Fantastic. So again, if it's near where you are, go see it. It's definitely a really fun movie. If it's not playing near you, you can request it. And then keep an eye on digital. So anything you'd like to say before we sign off?
I just, you know what? I think we were looking through comments the other day and someone said, this is like an acid Western comedy. And I was like, how dare you? Also, that's very accurate. I think I'm excited for people to see it and just have the experience of like, this is not what I expected
Mm.
and to be delighted by it. Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, have a good time. Let us know what you think.
Awesome. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Stacey, for being on the show. Again, like I said, I've been a fan of yours for years. I'm fangirling over here, trying to hide it, failing miserably. But thank you so much for being on here. And everybody, thank you so much for listening to Religion Unplugged, where you have all of your religion news and culture.